All right, doing a video on a D403 Honda pump. Before we get started on that, I'm going to show you the contrast of the difference of our regular pump. This is the regular cast iron pump that we run. This is just called a centrifugal pump. What happens here is there's an impeller inside that spins, it draws water in the center, and that impeller throws water out this discharge port. So when I take that off, I can see here, this is where the water gets sucked in, goes into the impeller here, and it gets thrown out of the impeller all the way around here. This disc just continues to spin. Very few moving parts, not very much on this that can break. Okay, that's how our regular centrifugal pumps work. We have other videos that talk about that. Today I'm talking about the D403 pump. This is a diaphragm pump. So how does a diaphragm pump work? A diaphragm pump has pistons that go up and down on a crankshaft, just like an engine, but they have this rubber diaphragm attached to the top of it. And what happens is when the piston goes down, it pulls the diaphragm into a dome and it creates a suction in there and water rushes in. And then when the piston goes up, it pushes this diaphragm up and it forces all that water out. So it draws water in and then it pushes water out, and the diaphragm is the rubber seal that just flexes one way or the other as this is pumping. So this pump has three diaphragms, one here, and one here, which means it has three pistons. So this piston's going up and down, this piston's going up and down, and this piston over here is going up and down, and they're all running on this crankshaft. So if you look at the end of this crankshaft, you can see it spins right here, and it's got this cam to it where it causes that to go up and down. So as this spins around, this piston moves up and down because of this extra meat right here. All right, this is bathed in oil, so this has to be lubricated to do that. On the other side of this diaphragm is water. So over time, this diaphragm starts to fail. The diaphragm will crack around the edge of it, and if the diaphragm cracks, it'll allow water to seep in. You can, I guess that's not cracked yet, but if water is allowed to get through this diaphragm to the underside of this piston, or to the top side of the piston, it'll run down the side of the piston and into the crankcase, and then the oil becomes contaminated with water and it loses all its lubrication properties. So that's something we should be checking for every day. Super easy to check for that. Right here is the oil reservoir for the pump. That this oil right here, this oil level right here, is the oil level that's in this crankcase. So we're drawing water in on top of the piston. Every time the piston goes up and down, it's pulling water in, pushing water out. This diaphragm cracks and water gets squirted through that crack down into the cylinder and then down into the crankcase where this crank goes. This crank hooks to the engine over here and it just spins and runs these pistons up and down. So if water is allowed to get into that crankcase, you're going to see that right here with real milky oil. It's not going to be nice golden honey brown engine oil color. It's going to be a real white milky color, and that tells you that there's moisture in it. Sometimes it's just a little bit of moisture, that's okay, but oftentimes when this starts to turn real milky, you know that you've got a problem with one of these three diaphragms. We need to change all three of them before we blow this pump up. Okay? The cost of this pump altogether, it's about $1,400. The engine itself is one component. That's about $200 or $300. In the middle, there's a gear reduction because the engine turns real fast. We have to slow that down to the speed that the pump turns at. So this is a gearbox in the center, or a gear reduction box, costs $400 or $500. And then this pump on the end that has these three pistons and a head and valves and cylinders and rings and a crankshaft, all kinds of moving parts in here. This unit here costs about $700 or $800 to replace this whole unit. So when you put them all together to buy it as a complete unit, you're almost $1,500 as a complete setup. All right? So if we see milky oil right here, we know that we've got water in our oil. Also, if there's no oil in it, that means that there's a hole in the diaphragm and the oil has been pumped into the water and then it's got discharged out our hose and we're not lubricating our crankcase at all. So every single day when you go to start this pump, we should be looking at this oil reservoir, making sure this oil reservoir is filled to the appropriate level and it's got nice golden honey brown engine oil in it. So what kind of engine oil goes in it? We also have this O-ring on the cap that you want to make sure is there. Don't lose the O-ring or it'll leak out around the cap. So the oil for this pump is just regular motor oil, 30 weight motor oil. If you can't find 30 weight motor oil, get 5W30 or 10W30. Any of those will work. All right, but we just fill this with just regular motor oil. Same motor oil that we put here in the engine. Every day you want to check the engine oil. All right, and this should be filled to the top where it's just kind of running out. We got this thing setting sideways there, so when we tip it up flat, you can see that it stops, the oil stops leaking out right there. But that's all black, and we really ought to change that. We really want that to be kind of a golden brown as well. It may not be as golden brown as this oil here. By the way, this is a brand new pump we just put on this because it ran out of oil or it got contaminated with water and it took this pump out. So a $700 pump here just got put on here brand new. All right, because it ran out of oil, probably because one of these diaphragms cracked and it needed to get replaced. Just like this pump here. You can see down in there, that crankshaft right there, that turns over and it runs the 3 pistons. This one went bad because of a lack of oil. This one went bad because of a lack of oil. This one went bad. This one, this one, this one, this one. These are all blown up pumps. Every one of them failed because the diaphragm failed and the operator did not pay attention to the oil level, and either the oil level turned creamy, milky white, or it sucked all the oil out and they didn't even notice and they just kept running it. And ultimately, the pump failed because of it. Okay? So you really need to look at this. So I said there's 3 places to check the oil. One of them is here. It takes just regular 30 weight oil. The other one is here. It takes just regular 30 weight oil. Same oil. Same oil you put in the engine, you put in the pump. Okay? And then the third place where you check oil is right here in the middle. And this one has a little dipstick on it. And it shows you where the level is supposed to be. And that one takes gear oil. So this is gear oil, 80 weight, 90 weight gear oil. And you put that right in there. All right? And you fill it up until the dipstick shows that it's full. So every day, every single day, you should be looking at this. All right? Every few days, you should be making sure the engine oil and the gear oil are full. I will say every day, but I know you're not going to do that. Okay? But make sure at least every day you're looking at this sight glass. Every single time you walk by this pump, look at this sight glass. We have never blown up one of these Honda engines because of a lack of oil, but we blow these pumps up, as you can see here on the trailer, all the time because the diaphragms go bad and we run them either with milky oil or water contaminated oil or with no oil at all. And it's always obvious because whenever they come back, this reservoir is either empty or it's full of white cream. And we know that that means that the diaphragm went bad and it took oil on, or it took water in. So, all right, there's your quick crash course on a D403 pump.